Can you imagine, good morning, with such an introduction, how you are feeling? But just to be back on earth. Indeed, it is the second term in office. And after my first term in office, I was absolutely 100% certain that there was no second term in office, anyhow not for me. And quite clear and very basic, my political party at that time was not in office, so no way that I could think one split second to be asked for a second term. And I wasn't willing to change my political party membership, so it was clear. And then at a certain moment, the then Prime Minister just jumped over his own shadow. Don't ask me how and so on, but anyhow the result was there. And I got this portfolio. And so completely surprised by the way it all started. And that is interesting. Democracy sometimes is fascinating, for it is about communication. For before I was asked for this portfolio, I was invited for a well-known Sunday program, a dialogue with one person and the journalist. And the person was asking me, you of course will go for a second term. And I said, with the explanation, no way, political background and so on. And he said, you can't be serious. And I said, yes, I'm completely serious and I'm realistic. So long story short, then the whole outside world started and said, those politicians that are not going for someone who has the experience and who didn't do a bad job, you should keep her. Long story short, that was the result. But then fascinating area was quite played down. People, when I was doing my shopping, I'm just buying my own stuff, so some people are surprised and are asking me, are you buying your own stuff in a supermarket? And I always said, I'm not eating pills, so I need to. But having said that, those people were saying, great for you that you have a second term. But poor you with this portfolio. For the other one was quite challenging, and this one, my goodness, what it's all about. So I asked my people in the cabinet, and quite a number of the cabinet of my former term were joining me and are joining me today. And I said, let's keep silent. Let's first prove what's all about. And to be quite open and honest to you, the first one was indeed the referee in the football game, so to say. So then I had a lot of clients, so to say. But nowadays it's creative, it's innovative, it's about people, it's about the citizens, and indeed it is never a dull moment. It is fascinating for just being aware what is at stake 3 months from now. We are not really aware. And that is a bit my frustration for being in a climate where you have to legislate or where you have to just create regulation or whatever. That takes time, and sometimes I do have the feeling when we are finished with that process, some people outside are laughing, for that is already old-fashioned stuff, so to say. But anyhow, it is exciting to be in your midst, and I'm really looking forward also for comments if you allow your audience to do so. For what I want to do is, and indeed you were talking about growth, about opportunity, and about jobs. Yesterday, and that was a bit of a frustration, it was also a challenging event, so to say, and some of you have read that this morning in the FT, and yesterday you read a bit of the story, but also in other journals there is quite a bit of information what is at stake with talking about high-speed broadband and investment and telecom and incumbents and what have you. I won't bother you, for you are inviting me to talk about a complete other issue. But one issue that I'm puzzled about, one of the CEOs, and not an unimportant one, I won't mention names, he was saying during lunch to me, Neelie, are you completely out of reality? And I said, not that I'm aware of, so go on, next line. And he said, are you thinking that in 2020 we really need high-speed broadband and that's all about? And I said, yes, what is changed in your mind? He said, we don't need it, come on. And you're mentioning that millions of jobs will be created by just implementing what we are proposing in the digital agenda. Come on, it will just slim off the number of jobs. And I said, what jobs are you talking of? And what generation are you yourself giving a representation of? So still a lot to do, and still being involved in this type of discussions, and I'm learning on the spot, so to say. What I like to sketch out, and that is indeed I'm aware of the economic and financial situation, so don't worry that I'm not involved in that discussion. But that is one part, and we of course need to solve, and we of course need to tackle all those challenges. But for me, far more important is taking the opportunity to fill in what type of economy do you have in mind for Europe when, and not talking about years from now, but when we are indeed competing with a global world. For there is no border anymore. Even the European Union, when we are talking about the digital agenda, is borderless, so to say. So we have to be prepared what type of economy we do want to have in place. And having said that, then of course you need to be aware of what possibilities, what opportunities there are. Okay, so implications of the digital agenda for Europe, the economic implications, and explain why action in those fields is so important in Europe, that will be at stake. So if you're not interested, you still can go for a cup of coffee, but I would prefer if you want to stay. For it is about not only supporting citizens, but also boosting confidence in ICT and to lift Europe's competitiveness. We need to get every European digital, and I put that on a small plastic card. This is what we believe. My people warned me and said, that is really risky. If you want to be fired halfway, then put it on such a card. But as you are aware, I'm Dutch and a bit straightforward, and I thought this is the best way to do it. So if we indeed are saying every European digital, because only then we can all benefit from the accelerating technological progress. Those objectives have never seemed more important at a time when citizens face an uncertain future. And perhaps you are explaining to me that we always were facing an uncertain future. That is per definition. But now we are even more aware because we have so much information about the uncertainty, so to say. So we need to go in that dialogue, and they turn to politicians to safeguard the economy. Yes, and we have to be explicit, and we have to deliver those jobs and opportunities for the next generation. In a way, ICT was never ever better positioned to help achieve those objectives than today. So that is a plus. The statistics for the economic power of ICT are really amazing. The sector represents 1/2 of our productivity growth. And you know the growth figure is not that big, but 1/2 of our productivity growth is in that sector. And the SMEs using web technology export and growth twice as much. So that is really a proven fact. And over just 10 years, the right broadband development could give Europe over 1 trillion euros in extra economic activities and millions of extra jobs. So that was the line that counterpart, thanks heaven only one of them was explaining to me, that I was out of my mind. The digital single market, it is absolutely a crown jewel. And let me start with talking about that one. The most important element is a digital single market seems an obvious step. In principle, it should be easier to sell digital goods from a distance than real goods. It is quicker and it's more efficient, so here we are. And everybody would be excused for thinking this should also be possible in reality. Having said that, and then yet invisible barriers stand in the way, and then my first frustration. It's not the first today, but for this audience. If I can buy a music CD online from a company in the Netherlands and have it posted to me here in Belgium, where I'm living, why can't I buy a digital download from the same company? So if you can explain it to me, then I would be not happy, but I won't accept it, but anyhow. If I can watch my local team's football matches using online pay-per-view in one member state, why not in 27? For then, otherwise I'm forced to go for an illegal conduct, so to say. This situation doesn't make much sense to the men on the street when you can't explain why that is possible. To be honest, it is not a situation that makes much sense to me, and we need to fix it, and we are trying to do that. But sometimes in Brussels you need eternal life to fix things, and I don't believe in eternal life. So, number 2, removing barriers to the expansion of the digital economy has a lot to offer economically. It will be worth, and I'm talking about euros, 1,500 euros per year for each and every EU citizen. So that's not coffee money, so to say. And 31% of retailers think a more harmonized regulatory environment would boost their cross-border sales. And I'm really talking about retailers, so also the small ones, so to say. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, that this is not just about creating a new way to disseminate existing material. We also must create market opportunities for whole new types of content. And that is when I'm talking about millions of jobs. That is, of course, creativity and just taking your opportunities. A third point, we also need to ensure rules are applied consistently and uniformly across the digital single market to avoid rising compliance costs. Well, that also makes sense. To be a CIO in Europe, having to comply with 27 data protection regimes or facing 27 different legal environments for cloud computing is daunting and is bad for business. And fourth, because the single market is at the center of the EU, building the single market in the so-called traditional industries was a compelling success story for Europe. We can repeat that success in a digital future, and even with more success, for there are so many opportunities. And at a time of great economic and political doubt, we can show our citizens that the EU can do quite a bit for them improving their fortunes and opportunities. And as part of the digital agenda, we aim to have 50% of Europeans buying online by 2015. Again, on that plastic card. So I'm pinned to that. And we are getting there, no doubt. Across Europe, e-commerce is racing ahead, with both businesses and retail consumers buying more online. But barriers between countries mean that cross-border sales are the slow coach in that race, dragging everyone else down. And we badly need further harmonization. And I'm, of course, with Michel Barnier, active in that field. I will present an action plan to boost e-commerce with concrete proposals on safe online payments, including micro-payments, and means to secure cross-border transactions. Talking about the digital content and open data, and I'm absolutely aware that you are quite fascinated by that. I want to see digital content markets thrive across Europe. I want to make it easier to produce that content, letting producers benefit from the EU-wide economies of scale and letting consumers benefit from more choice. To that end, we recently launched a consultation on creative content online to ensure Europe seizes the opportunities for TV and movies in the digital age. When it comes to content, the public sector can lead. And I'm just back from a very fascinating trip to Kenya, so that was just business, by the way, internet governance conference with 2,000 stakeholders, so quite a challenging audience, so to say. But what was fascinating in Kenya, the government has begun to open up its public sector. And they are providing a valuable raw material for others to use. For instance, weather data or demographic statistics. So Kenya's government, they are not all bad. Some of them are now in The Hague in the court, but some are still at home and doing their business. And the Kenya people are already seeing the benefits, whether as businessmen, civil society groups, researchers, citizens, or public authority representatives. And I want us to do the same in Europe and across Europe. Some member states currently act as role models in this field, but others of the family, so to say, have barely started to move. So talking about, for example, the UK, they have already an advanced open data platform, and the French government has vowed to put its own version up rather soon, while there are many cities and regions that move ahead without waiting for a central government action. Other parts of Europe trail Kenya and other adapters around the world. We need to change that. We need to overcome the inertia to this development in the public sector. And I want public sector workers on all levels to be proud of providing a first-rate data and information service to citizens, which can be reused to create new content and new services. And getting out the data under, of course, reasonable conditions for quality and speed and reusability should become quite a routine part of the business of public administration. It shouldn't be just an exception. It should be routine. And that investment by the public sector will be good for transparency, will be good for accountability, good for scientific progress, and good for our economy. To this end, I will propose a policy package in November, including a review of the directive on the reuse of public sector information. And then I want to speed up and I need your backing. Alongside the work on a digital single market, I also want to ensure users feel safe and secure online so that they can trust the new technology and use them routinely and with confidence. If there is no trust, and I'm more aware than ever, I can't expect that every European will go digital. Even if I'm saying you should go digital, still 25% of the European population hasn't yet got the information via internet that it is great and so on. So we need to build on that trust, for otherwise people will be hesitating. And of course I'm aware that a part of the 25% really is not interested, but quite often it is not having the information that it should be of interest for them. And of course, that should allow space for the innovative business models which constantly bloom in the digital world, so that altogether we can enable the digital economy to reach its full potential. Just an example. Many users are concerned about their privacy online. I believe we need sound rules based on a couple of principles. To be a bit more precise, 3. Transparency, so that the citizens know exactly what the deal is. That is not news, is it? That is, you would say, isn't that normal? Well, it should be absolutely normal. The second point, fairness, so that citizens are not forced or tricked into sharing their data. Seems to be quite open door, but still a lot has to be done to make it indeed reality. And third, user control, so that the citizen, at the end of the day, can decide in a simple and effective manner, for not very complicated, what they allow others to know. And I think that makes sense talking about trust. We have already introduced rules, for example, on how data should be secured, on transparency with regard to tracking technologies, such as cookies and fighting spam. I'm convinced, ladies and gentlemen, that those aims are compatible with our digital agenda targets on the continued growth of the digital and online economies. And ladies and gentlemen, then of course we need to take into account that we must not sacrifice citizens' right to privacy, to economic interest, but we can also not afford to damage legitimate economic interest by insisting on too inflexible or cumbersome implementations of privacy rules and the paternalistic attitude towards citizens they embody. And therefore I've challenged the web industry to agree by next June a standard for do not track technology. What do I mean with a do not track technology? Give users more control over who can track them online. Make it easy for businesses to do the right thing and boost the opportunities for designers and application and device makers to come up with clear and user-friendly ways of recording and enforcing user preferences. And I also want to improve confidence by, for example, ensuring people know their children can serve safely, respectfully, and responsibly, and countering the increasing number of cyber threats against our networks and infrastructures. Just talking about the children, one of my priorities, I think that, and that is in general terms, we have a responsibility for the vulnerables, and certainly talking about the children that we need to give them and their parents a safe feeling, and not only a feeling, but safe and respectful and responsible environment. The other line, broadband for all. Perhaps most importantly, we must ensure we have super fast digital networks for everyone. It is, as I always say, the oxygen of a digital ecosystem. In part stimulating the development of content, as I've outlined already, will already do that because it will boost the consumer demand and make the business case for broadband investments more attractive. But we need to go further. And that was what I was touching upon yesterday, so my number of friends are limited again, but I will say I'm not interested in making friends during my job, but I'm interested in keeping my personal friends, and that's it. But anyhow, I set out the measures yesterday we need to take to stimulate broadband investments. And that is interesting for I was anyhow counting my blessings. During a couple of months we were discussing within the Commission a new proposal connecting Europe facilities, and I was successful so far, so I crossed my fingers to get 9.2 billion out of it, and that could leverage, by the way, 9.2 billion over 100 billion euros of overall, mostly private investment to support broadband deployment and pan-European digital public services. If you take into account that with that proposal of the high-speed broadband, it's not talking about an investment in 1 year, it is spread over 7 years. By the way, no punishment when it is shorter, but just talking in realistic terms. And then we are talking about 270 billion euros. I always think that it's a bit lower, but let's take the safe level. So if you can just, with that amount of money from the Commission, if you can leverage to 100 billion, that makes sense. So that is really a push. I would have expected perhaps no flowers yesterday, but anyhow, applause, great what you did. And they said, we are not interested in your 9 billion. And well, then, of course, and not all, but some were saying, no, for that would just open the market for other ones. And they are really appreciating a situation where they are the king of the park, so to say. Anyhow, it's the first time, by the way, that Connecting Europe facility, that such a measure is proposed, and I am absolutely aware of the importance, not only for the digital agenda, for that is, I'm too grown up to put everything on the digital agenda account, but it is absolutely main for Europe and for getting every European digital, and there I'm back to the citizen. And I will do all I can to ensure that that instrument is put to good use, and I invite, by the way, everybody else to do the same. A consultation on cost accounting methodology will also help us to set the right incentives for new network investments. So I'm waiting for the result of that. That is quite a new approach, so to say, and I'm absolutely believing that that will give us new food for thought. And to support the burgeoning wireless sector, we are developing spectrum management policies, which are coordinated, flexible, and competitive. Talking about spectrum, it is indeed one of those issues that some are still thinking of a couple of centuries ago, but we should focus on our future. Cloud computing. Also such a fascinating issue, and that is in this portfolio. And indeed, certain terms were never ever in the dictionary 2 decades ago. So cloud computing, new wording. We want to do all of this with an eye on the future, on the new technologies yet to emerge. Cloud computing, for example, a technological paradigm which can help increase efficiency, flexibility of ICT use while reducing overheads and capital expenditures. When we are thinking what this could mean for smaller companies, so really the small companies, and for startups in particular, they could gain great from the cloud, both on the demand side, by obtaining more flexible and scalable and responsive computing ability, but also on the supply side to seize the new opportunities opened up by the cloud from niches to whole new markets. Smaller companies also have the least resources, for that is, of course, at stake. So, and market leverage to negotiate a marketplace dominated by still uncertainty and missing, incomplete or unclear rules. So cloud standards of all types abound and need to be consolidated in order to have a strong effect on the maturity of the cloud computing market. And I will do my utmost to make sure that Europe is not just cloud friendly for, okay, that's great, but I'm thinking of cloud active. And then that it is best positioned to seize the opportunities. And both on the demand side across our whole economy and on the supply side, where I would like to see more and new European players. And it's also very attractive for the startups. And after my visit to Silicon Valley a couple of weeks ago, I'm really backed in my thought that we are as intelligent, or perhaps sometimes even more intelligent. We are as innovative. We are as creative, and name it. But we still need to be a bit more reliable in not getting a stamp on your head when you are sometimes having a failure, or sometimes having a experience that wasn't the great one, when there are too many. But I can assure you I have a long list of mistakes, and I learned far more from that than from my successes, where that list is much shorter than the other one. But it is mentality, it's mindset, and it is the mindset change that we need at this certain moment. There are so many opportunities, and by the way, I'm pleased, and more than pleased, I'm confident to find out that so many of the younger generation are absolutely still active in that field and doing remarkable issues and finding out that they can get the place they want. So we need a right legal framework. We also need to ensure that all other public policy instruments are deployed in a coherent way to support that. And this is work in progress. Following a blueprint I set out during the World Economic Forum in January, and we have in the meantime collected a large body of input from studies to the several hundred responses to a public consultation, to direct input from a number of working groups organized by the industry who are finalizing those results. So cloud computing has no natural geographical borders. You will of course say, do you have more open doors? Well, being aware. We are therefore also working within our international partners in this. And that was fascinating in the discussions we had in Nairobi, for example, with our US counterparts, but also with our counterparts in the Far East. It is world activity, so we need to come to solutions in an international setting. And that will be done. Conclusion. To conclude this brief outline of what's on my plate as part of the digital agenda. The different elements of the agenda are not separate or isolated, but mutually supporting and mutually reliant. And if we achieve them, and if we achieve the dream of every European getting digital, we will have built the economic and social foundations for the future of Europe. And that is what is motivating me in this portfolio. And that sounds perhaps a bit emotional, but I'm always thinking, and that is my age, you are much younger than I am, but when my granddaughters would ask me, what did you do later on when they are grown ups? What did you do to give us a reliable experience in doing our own job, but not with a bankruptcy that you didn't tackle? That I'm just in a position that I can say, we did our utmost. We had a fascinating experience within the European Union. And can you imagine 27 member states united, still a lot to do, and still with some a bit ill and whatever. But we need to be aware that this is really a challenge, and that can be the difference between the answer that you feel comfortable to your children and to my grandchildren. Thank you.
so much.